Before we begin, tell me from what place in the world you are listening to this story, because today you will feel in your soul what it's like to have your destiny taken out of your own hands. It was a golden morning in Dubai. The sun danced on the turquoise waves as if the sea held secrets. The sky didn't have a single cloud, but in the midst of that infinite beauty, something incredible was about to happen. If something were to happen, something that would change forever the life of a young woman. Alina Volkova, a Russian of only 18 years old, shy dreamer, with a heart purer than the clear sand she walked on. She was on vacation with her mother, strolling along the beach like someone fleeing a simple and icy past. His feet, they touched the sea as if each step were a silent prayer for freedom. Her white dress fluttered in the wind. Her large, curious blue eyes looked to the horizon like someone who still believes in the impossible. It was a portrait of innocence that contrasted with everything that surrounded. And it was at that precise moment, at that instant frozen by the destiny, when his eyes found her. Sheikh Malik Khaladi, Arab billionaire, owner of oil empire, and a petrified heart, a feared, respected, untouchable man. He was on his yacht looking at the beach with the same disdain with which he looks at everything he already owns. But when he saw it, something broke. Something that he himself could not name. He murmured. "Your Majesty," asked his bodyguard. "Take her away," he ordered in a low but irrefutable voice. "She looks so young, sir." "No, I asked for your opinion." And then the men stepped off the yacht like shadows discreet and lethal. Alina was laughing with her mother. She was taking a selfie when they grabbed him by the arm. At first he thought it was a mugging. Then he screamed, he pleaded, and the world around him continued normally, as if he didn't see nothing. Because in Dubai, when men in black appear, fear silences the crowd. "Mom!" she cried before being sedated with a syringe in her neck. The last image he had before fainting was his mother's desperate face, running and being held by two armed men. And then darkness when he opened his eyes, hours later. Alina was lying on a luxurious bed, sheets of golden satin, a suite that looked more like a 7-star hotel, but there was no open windows or unlocked doors. Everything was beautiful, but without freedom, silk and chains, gold and prison. He tried to get up, but his legs were shaking. Legs. There was no sign of her mother or her cell phone, just a covered maid with a veil who entered silently with a tray. "Where am I?" she asked Alina in Russian. The woman didn't answer. She just put down the tray, looked down, and he left. Alina ran to the door, but it was locked. It was then he heard loud, precise footsteps and the handle slowly turning. The man who entered wasn't a security guard or a butler. It was him, Malik Khaladi, the man who saw her on the beach and decided she would be his. Tall, dark, with a penetrating and hard look. He wore an immaculate white robe with the looking like a desert king. "Now you're in my house," he said coldly. "I want my mother. Please, your mother is safe, but you belong to me." And so the nightmare began. Alina stepped back until she was leaning against the wall of the suite. His body was shaking as if he were in the middle of a Russian winter. Despite the stifling heat of the desert outside, the air in the room seemed too thick to breathe. I had never been so close to a man like that. So imposing, so dangerous. "Why?" he whispered in a broken voice. "Because you looked at me like no one dared to look at me," Malik replied calmly, as if he were saying the sky was blue. I looked at you. Yes, you did, even if you don't know it." There was a silence between them that it hurt, as if the universe had stopped turning just to witness that moment. "You can't do this to me," he said. She was trying to be firm. "Yes, I can, and I have." Her answer was like a stab in the heart. Alina fell to her knees, pleading like a little girl. "Please, I'm just a little girl. I have dreams, a life. I was just with my mother. You're with me now." She turned to leave as if that were enough, as if the world had to accept his will without explanation. But before closing the door, he looked over his shoulder and added, "You're the 16. She froze. The 16. What did that mean? The answer came hours later, when two silent maids led her through the halls, gilded to an inner courtyard surrounded by marble fountains, exotic flowers, and women. There were another 15, beautiful, mysterious, adorned with jewels but with dull eyes. Some looked at her with hatred, others with pity, one or the other with boredom. They all wore suits too elegant to be comfortable, but transparent enough to remind you who they were, really. "One more for the collection," a bitter female voice muttered. "It's just a girl," said another, laughing sarcastically. Alina didn't know where to hide. I wanted to scream, run, disappear, but the truth was alone. She was trapped, and no one would come to save her. In the following days, Alina was introduced in the RN protocol. Strict rules, rigid schedules, etiquette, dance, posture, silence. She was trained to please, to smile unwillingly, to bow down to a man who treated her like a possession, not as a person. The nights were the worst. I heard the footsteps in the hallway, and I knew that this would be the night Malik would come to possess her. I felt nauseous. She curled up in bed like a child afraid of the dark, but he didn't come or that week or the next, and that was even worse. The waiting, the fear, the unknown. It was a silent torture, a gilded prison, where luxury was nothing more than aftercard to hide the pain. And then, on an afternoon too hot to bear, they called Alina to the main hall. There he was, sitting on a carved Arabic throne hardwood, surrounded by guards and shadows. She entered with her head bowed, just as she had been taught. She looked up. The order was curt, but he obeyed. His eyes were different. There was no longer coldness, but curiosity. "You beg me, you don't flatter me, you don't challenge me. Why?" Alina took a deep breath. For the first time, she tried to find her voice. "Because I'm not a doll. I'm made of flesh, fear, and soul." The room fell silent, a silence that electrified the air. Malik stood up slowly, approaching with his eyes fixed in hers. For a second, she thought he was going to touch her, but he just murmured, interestingly, and he walked away. She returned to her room, not understanding what had just happened. But there, for the first time in weeks, he felt something new. He saw her not as a possession, not as just another wife, but as a threat to his own coldness. And so, with the most silent, the game began. Alina was still the 16th, but fate had already began to write another story, a story in which the prisoner would rise, a story in which the Russian virgin would become queen. The morning arrived like a silent painting, tinged with warm tones and dense shadows. The palace was still asleep, but Alina was already awake, contemplating the desert sky through a crack in the window of the tower where they had locked her up. There was something cruel about that motionless beauty, as if everything there was made to hypnotize, imprison, and suffocate. 4 weeks had passed since the day Malik Lady ordered her kidnapping on that beach. 4 weeks since the life of a young Russian woman, pure, dreamy, and fragile, shattered and yet untouched. Kisses. There were no caresses. There was no explicit violence, but there was silence. And the silence was a torture that made her bleed inside. Other wives said he was testing her, playing with the weight, creating expectations so that the moment of possessing her was more shocking. Some bet on how long she would last without crying in front of him. Others laughed behind her back and called her the cold doll of the North. But what no one knew was that Alina cried every night, alone, in silence. Still, he remembered his mother's face, that stifled scream. The last image of that sunny day. Was her mother alive? Was she trying to find her? Or was she already had convinced him that his daughter was gone forever? The heart of Alina cringed just thinking about it. That particular day, something different happened. A maid came to get her to take her to a new kind of class. Instead of etiquette, dancing, or Arabic cooking, they took her to the back of the palace where the inner gardens were. There, a woman was waiting for her. Major covered from head to toe, with the face partially uncovered, eyes black as coal, and a discreet scar on his left cheek. "My name is Amara. I am the only wife left. He doesn't sleep with him," the woman said in a firm and direct voice. Alina opened her eyes wide. Eyes. "You were his wife. I was the 5th. Now I'm just a shadow, but a shadow that watches everything." Amara spent the next few days teaching Lena not only how to survive in the sand, but also how to understand Malik. He doesn't choose beauty, he chooses soul. So why does he have 15 other women? Because none of them had soul enough to break down her walls. Those words resonated in Alina like a sentence. Perhaps that was the reason why he hadn't touched her yet. Maybe I was trying to understand if she was just one more or something more, but that didn't console her. That night, Alina was taken to the bathroom of the palace. The water was warm, covered with rose petals. The atmosphere was decorated like in the old tales of the 1-and-1 nights. But for her, everything, it was a theater. Nudity wasn't comfort, it was invasion. The other women looked at her with disdain hidden in smiles. "Still a virgin," said one of them provocatively. "He won't last more than a week without running to his bed," said another, "or without being thrown out." But Alina didn't answer. She was tired of empty words, of games disguised as rituals. The true battlefield was the gaze, and in that she began to win because Malik, he always looked back at her, silently, from a distance, as if he wanted to decipher it. Days later, Malik called all his wives to a dinner ceremonial. The main hall was decorated with Persian carpets, lamps' golden lights, and soft music resonated between the marble columns. Alina wore a deep red dress, a gift from Amara, a dress that hid more than it revealed. She looked like a queen insolence, sitting to the right of Malik's throne. The others couldn't stand it. She has barely arrived and they already place her next to him. It is an insult to those who have already demonstrated his loyalty. But Malik didn't say a word. He just watched every Alina's gesture, every held breath, every movement of her small hands on the luxurious fabric. I saw in her something the others no longer had: dignity and suffering. After dinner, Alina was escorted to the inner gardens. There Malik was waiting for her alone. She stopped a few meters away, not knowing what to say. Heart was pounding, his hands were sweating, but he kept his head high. "You're not like them," he said finally. "I'm not a wife, but you're mine." Silence. "Do you think I'm a monster? You stole my life and brought me here as a trophy." He approached slowly until their faces were just inches apart. Her scent was woody, intense, dominant, but at the same time warm. "And yet you don't hate me like you should." She swallowed. She had no answer. It was true. I should hate him. I should scream, hit him, spit on him. But for some reason she herself did not understand, the hatred had begun to give way to something deeper, something that it hurt in a different way. Repressed desire, dangerous curiosity, fear, and fascination. Malik ran his fingers over the tip of the veil covering her hair, but he didn't. He touched her face. "Good night, Alina," he said, and left. She remained there motionless, with eyes full of unshed tears. He left her with more questions than answers. In the following days, the sand remained insolence. Something had changed. The wives began to realize that she wasn't just another one. There was something about the cold Russian woman that melted the desert, that surrounded her, and the hatred grew. Alina felt the stares on her back. I heard the whispers at night. I knew something was afoot, but what she didn't know was who would be the first to try to destroy her. And that one night, finding a withered flower on her bed, with thorns hidden among the petals, Alina understood. The arena was a battlefield, and the next attack was very close. The silence of the early morning was treacherous in the palace of Malik Aladi. Among the walls decorated with gold and Andalusian mosaics, whispers slithered like snakes ready to strike. And in the middle of all that tension was her, Alina Volkova, the 16th wife, the one who did not had been touched, the one who began to threaten all the others without even raise her voice. That night, Alina woke up to a soft noise, as if something slipped under his door. When he got up to check, he found Asmal crumpled parchment on the floor. His trembling hands held the paper, and what he read stirred his stomach. "If you don't come out of your own free will, you won't come out alive." The words were written in dark ink, almost like blood. Fear filled him, ran down his back like an icy knife. He ran to the window, but the darkness of the desert was as thick as the walls that surrounded her. She was being threatened. Who? Which of them? Them? All of them. And why? The answer was obvious. Malik, or rather his attention, his silence, his gaze. And although he had never touched her, the simple fact that he looked at her as if she were made of something different, purer, more valuable, was reason enough to unleash hatred in the hearts of other women. The next morning, Alina went to the gardens as usual, but everything was strange. The maids avoided her. The other wives whispered. The air seemed heavier. Even Amara, Heronly ally, was absent. He tried to concentrate on the lessons, but there was something inside her, a dark feeling. And when she was called to the tea room hours later, knew that the worst was about to happen. The atmosphere was cold despite the desert heat. Malik was sitting there, motionless. Beside her, a woman with eye makeup and a triumphant expression. Layla, the third wife, the oldest, and the most venomous. "Your Majesty," said Layla with false reverence, "I must report a serious incident." Malik didn't take his eyes off Alina. He spoke. "I found this girl hiding letters in the garden." Letters addressed to a man outside the palace. "That's Italy!" Alina shouted, but Layla interrupted her. "Here's the proof." He handed over a small piece of paper, a letter written in Alina's handwriting that I had written weeks before, but had never sent it. It was a secret personal message in which he spoke of his pain, of how much he missed his mother, of his loneliness. Someone had stolen the wallpaper from his room. He was planning to run away. He had an accomplice. Alina felt the ground slipping from under her feet. Her hands were sweating, was short of breath. He tried to speak, but Malik raised his hand. His gaze, it had gotten dark. "It was freezing, is that true?" he asked in a firm voice. "I wrote it, but I never delivered it." "I swear, Layla is a trustworthy wife. You're just a guest." That sentence was like a slap in the face. Malik stood up and approached Alina with slow, firm steps. She kept her chin high, even though her heart was breaking inside. "You have betrayed the confidence of my palace. You brought me here against my will," she replied with a broken voice. "And yet they took you in, fed you, protected, and now you betray." He raised his hand. For a second, Alina thought he was going to hit her, but he just snapped his fingers. Two appeared guards. "Take her to the punishment room." 7 hours. "Malik, please don't say my name," he replied without emotion. "You have no right." And then they dragged him. The punishment room wasn't a medieval dungeon, it was worse. It was white, sterile, silent. The loudest sound was that of her own heart. They tied her to a chair. They tied her arms with red silk. It was a punishment, ceremonial, a theater of domination. There would be no physical marks, but the trauma that would be eternal. For 7 hours, Alina sat there, alone, without no food, no water, no sound, no light, a suffocating emptiness that seemed to scream in his ears. He cried, he prayed, he begged, then he fell, and when the guards returned, he was no longer saying anything. He had no more tears. She wasn't afraid anymore, she had hate. In the following days, they left her aside, isolated. Classes stopped. Amara did not appear. The wives laughed at Hidden and Malik. Malik didn't look for her, but inside Alina something was gestating. She was no longer the innocent girl from the beach. She was a woman, a wounded soul, shaped by pain. The next night, Layla crept into her chambers. "I thought you'd apologize." "Sorry," Alina said coldly. "Do you think you're special? He'll never love anyone, not even you. He doesn't need love me. He just needs to see the truth." Layla laughed, but something in her eyes hesitated. Alina was changing. There was something new in her tone of voice. Firmness, control. "You think you know how to play, but you've never seen anyone like me, Layla." The other wife left silently, and for the first time she was afraid. At dawn, Alina wrote a new letter, but this time not to run away. It was for herself. A promise, a pact. "I'm not going to wait any longer to be saved. I will be my own salvation. And when he looks at me again, it will be with admiration or will be on my knees. I won't be the 16th anymore. I'll be the only one." When he finished, he broke the paper into pieces and burned each one. He closed his eyes and smiled for first time. The war had begun, and the next day Malik called her, but this time she wouldn't come with her head bowed. Night fell with cruel slowness over Malik Aladi's palace. The desert wind blew warmly through the cracks in the marble windows, as if warning that something was approaching, something inevitable, something definitive. Alina Volkova sat in front of the gold mirror with her hands trembling in her lap. A silent servant, she combed her hair, delicately tangling the snow-white strands. The black silk dress was slid over her body like a living shadow. It was the first time she had worn black since her arrival, the color of night, of mourning and transformation. She had been summoned. Malik had sent call her to his chambers. This time there were no false accusations, there was no hostile guards, there was no warning, just a direct message. In the wait, and that simple phrase made her heart clench in her chest like a panicked creature. Alina, he walked through the halls of the palace with measured steps, feeling each beat of his heart like thunder. The floor, cold and polished, reflected its silhouette, as if the palace wanted to engrave in it the memory of everything that would come later. At every step, the memories mingled. The beach, her mother's scream, the punishment, Layla's eyes, and the eyes of him. But now it was no longer fear. It was something new, something that burned inside. When he arrived at the cedar-carved door, and the guards opened it without a word, and there he was, Malik. He was wearing only a light tunic, without the traditional kofil. His hair black fell loose over his shoulders, his feet bare, his eyes fixed on she, without arrogance, without authority. There was something human in them, something broken. The room was spacious, but quiet. The scent in the air was intense and woody. Candles were lit throughout the room, casting dancing shadows on the golden walls. And in the center, a spread carpet, 2 glasses, a bottle of wine, and silence. "Sit down," he said. She obeyed. In front of him. The sound of their breathing was the only noise in the air. "Do you know why I told you?" called. "I imagine so," she replied with dignity. But her voice failed, a slight trembling. Malik filled both glasses and handed one to her. "Drink." He hesitated, then drank. The wine was sweet, strong, like him. For long minutes, they didn't say anything. They just drank. They just looked at each other. "Do you hate me?" he asked in a serious. She thought, "I'd like to, but I can't." "Why?" "Because every time I look, it seems you're not the same man who kidnapped me." He took a deep breath. He rested his elbows on his knees and lowered his head. "Have you seen me?" he murmured. "Yes," she replied. "That's it. Dangerous for me or for you." He looked up. "That..." His gaze burned not with anger, but with something much more intimate, an internal struggle, a man torn between control and surrender. "I haven't touched you, not out of respect, but out of fear." "Fear of what?" "To lose myself." The confession fell between them like a silent lightning bolt. Alina froze, with shortness of breath, heart about to explode. "And this night?" she asked. "Tonight I want to find out if I can afford it." He approached slowly, knelt before her, and gently touched her hand. For the first time, his fingers touched hers as if they were sacred, as if she was made of glass or fire. Alina. She closed her eyes, everything her body on alert. The fear was still there, but along with it, desire, repressed for weeks, unexpressed feelings, unexpressed sensations understood. She wanted to run away, but she wanted to stay. She wanted to protect herself, but she also wanted to feel. When his lips approached hers, she stopped the gesture with a touch of her fingers to his mouth. "Promise me it won't be like the other times." How cold, mechanical owner. "No," he said. "Promise me you'll see me." He leaned his forehead against hers. "You're the only one I can't stop looking at." And then the kiss, slow, hot, full of pauses and regret. It wasn't a kiss of possession. It was one of surrender. The carpet felt the weight of both. The glasses were forgotten. The air became denser. Their hands, they explored his back calmly, like someone discovering a relic. The body Alina's reaction was between fear and discovery. But when he began tunty the bow of her dress, she shuddered. "Wait," she whispered. Hess stopped immediately. "Are you in charge?" "No, me," Malik said. She breathed with tearful eyes. "I want to, but I'm afraid. Afraid of myself, of feeling something and then be discarded like the others." He walked away, sat down again, covered himself, face with your hands. "You're killing me little by little. Why?" "Because for the first time, I'm ashamed of what I did." Alina came over and touched his face. It was the first time he touched Malik, and there was no trembling in his fingers. There was compassion. "It's not too late to redeem oneself. With you, with the man who can still be." Malik smiled. A broken, pained, sincere smile. "Tonight, I won't possess you. Tonight, I'll just be by your side." She lay down his side with his head on his chest. The two of them there, 2 wounded hearts beating to the same rhythm. No words, just synchronized breathing, the warmth of bodies and presence. It was the first night they slept together, but not as man and woman, as souls in reconstruction. The next morning, when the other wives learned that Alina had spent the night in the rooms of Malik, hatred spread like a plague. But what no one knew was that nothing had happened, at least not in the way they expected. The truth was that it was a lot more powerful than any physical contact. Malik had fallen in love, and Alina, I was starting to feel the same way. But with that, the danger increased, and a new betrayal was already being plotted. The sun had barely risen on the horizon when the palace of Malikaladi awoke in full swing. The maids murmured in the corridors. The guards whispered in low voices, and between the golden walls of the arena the poison flowed. Alina had spent the night with the sheikh, and that was enough for the masks to fall. Other wives could not hide their angry looks, their tense steps, the falseness of their smiles. For them, she had won. Despite not having been touched, despite not having slept with him as the others had done so many other times, she had conquered what no one had ever had before, her heart. And that was unacceptable. That morning, Alina, she walked through the gardens as usual, dressed in a simple light linen tunic. Her steps were calm, but his eyes were alert. He had learned with pain and silence that the luxury of the palace was nothing more than a curtain. The real game it took place in the depths of the soul, where power, fear, and desire intertwined. He did not seek the confrontation, but he no longer feared it. It was then that Layla crossed his path, the third wife, the cruelest, the most threatened. So, did you sleep with him? The question was like a stab. Alina, he stopped. He took a deep breath. We slept together, but not as you imagined. Poor thing. Do you still think there's room for tenderness here? Tenderness, Layla, is what separates the queens from the concubines. Layla smiled, but there was a glimmer of hatred in his eyes. He was losing ground, and he knew it. You are not a queen, you're just a temporary whim. So why are you so nervous? Without waiting for an answer, Alina walked away, and there, at that moment, she declared her love war. That same night, Malik called her again, but this time not to her chambers. He led her to the inner courtyard, where an ancient fountain gushed water clear under the moonlight. There, just the two of them, nothing but the sound of the water and silence filled with unspoken words. Alina, I want to change everything, all of it, the sand, the rules, my way of life. She looked at him in surprise. Are you serious? Yes, for the first time in years, but why? Because you taught me to see beyond possession. Because you remind me of who I was before power. Alina became emotional. Here ye's shone, but not out of weakness, out of strength, out of recognition. So listen to me. Do justice. Start from within. How? Drive out the snakes. Get rid of those that feed on poison. Malik hesitated. Do you want me to drive out to Layla? She tried to destroy me, and if you don't do anything, she'll try again. He watched for long seconds. Tomorrow the sand will change forever. The next morning, a decree was read in the main hall. Malik declared the dissolution of the Aran rotating system. From that day on, all wives who no longer had any relationship with him would be moved to another wing of the palace without status or privileges. Only there would remain those he still trusted. Layla was not among them. He screamed, he begged, he said it was an injustice, that he was bewitched, but Malik was cold. You chose the poison, I chose the cure. You'll regret it, Malik. If it's for love, I don't care. Layla was escorted out. The other wives silently understood the message. The reign of the intrigues were over, and Alina was now the most powerful woman in that palace. But with power came isolation. Alina couldn't get used to the throne. The new wing they had given him was beautiful but lonely. The maids served her reverently but without emotion. She had become queen, but in a kingdom in which she still felt like a prisoner. One night, sitting next to the window, she heard footsteps, and soon Malik came in. You are unhappy. I'm confused. Why? Because I've achieved everything the others wanted it. But I don't feel victorious. You wanted freedom, and I'm still yours. Prison. She didn't answer, but her eyes said it all. So, let me be your key, he said, coming closer. He sat down next to her, took her hands, and for the first time, Malikaladi knelt. I know what I did. I know what I was, but I want to be different for you. With you. Alina cried, but not from sadness, but from relief, from recognition. You don't have me yet, but now you have the right to try. He approached with his face close to hers. Their lips almost touched, but she pulled away. Not yet. When? When I'm no longer afraid of myself about you. He respected it, as always, did now and left, but the world outside the arena did not sleep. Layla, humiliated, exiled in the forgotten wing of the palace. She planned her revenge. He knew secrets, he knew hidden passages, and most of all, He knew men, willing to destroy Malik for a price. He had written a letter, and it was sent to Wood hand over someone powerful. The internal war had been won, but the external threat was about to explode, and neither Alina nor Malik were prepared for what was to come. The full moon lit up the desert sky like a silver mirror. High up from the main tower, Alina watched the silent dunes that stretched to the horizon, as if searching for them an answer. 2 years ago, those same sands had witnessed his kidnapping, her tears and the birth of her pain. Now they would witness her promotion. That night the palace was quieter than usual. The ancient wives had been relocated. The hallways, once filled with voices and footsteps, were empty, and what had once been the Dubai's most feared arena, now a symbol of transformation. At the center of it all was her, the Russian, the 16th, the one who survived. The title of only wife did not only come accompanied by jewels and thrones, he carried with him the weight of glances, expectations, and dangers. Alina knew she couldn't make mistakes. She knew her victory was fragile as glass under the feet of one who dares to run. Even so, it is not he regretted it. That same night, Malik entered his chambers, not as a sheikh arrogant, but as a transformed man. He wore simple clothes. He had a serene gaze and empty hands. No gold, no authority, just him. Alina looked at him with the calm of someone who has learned to tame her own heart. I came here unannounced. I've already noticed. Do you still think you can just walk into my room without knocking? Old habits die hard, he smiled, a genuine smile. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he could breathe near him. There was no longer any tension between them, only a silent complicity. Today, the palace, you're different, she said. You're different today. Inside, maybe because outside, I'm still the kidnapped girl on the beach. Malik approached slowly. He sat next to her on the large open terrace. The desert breeze caressed Alina's hair, and he looked at her like someone contemplating a miracle. Alina, I brought you here without asking you, against your will. But if I asked you today to be free to say no, what would your answer be? She closed her eyes for a few seconds, took a deep breath, then stared at him. I'm still discovering the woman I am, but the girl I was would have fled. The woman in the one I'm becoming wants to stay. The answer touched him like arrow. Malik never knew what it was like to be seen so clearly. In all the women he had, he sought body, beauty, his mission. But with Alina, it was different. She was a mirror. She was fire and water. She was the reflection that made him question his own existence. That night, he didn't try to touch her. They stayed there, one side by side, looking out over the desert. As he stood up to leave, Alina approached. Wait, Malik stopped. Stay tonight, but just sleep. I want to feel your presence as a man, not as an owner. He nodded. He lay down beside her on the large bed of white veils, and they slept holding hands in silence, with the kest light as the wind that came through the window. At dawn, the first rays of the sun touched the sheets still messy from the night before. Alina woke up first, looked. Malik was sleeping soundly, vulnerable, human. It was at that moment when she realized the man who had kidnapped her no longer existed. The man who was now at her side was Theman she was helping to give birth to. That morning, Alina decided to take action. He asked to gather the palace maids. He said he wanted to make changes. At first, there was resistance. The arena was governed by ancient traditions. But when Malik appeared at her side in public and declared that all her orders would have the same weight as his, the palace bowed. Alina didn't want luxuries. She wanted transformation. He ordered the former wives' rooms to be renovated and converted into a school for the palace maids. Reading, writing, languages, music, and history were taught. For the first time, the women who once lived to serve began to dream of freedom. That young Russian woman, kidnapped and humiliated, she was now a symbol of hope. But elsewhere in the palace, far from everyone's sight, Layla observed everything. In exile, she nurtured hatred like one nurtures a wounded snake. He knew he couldn't beat Alina head-on, so decided to attack from the shadows. He knew things. He kept secrets, including the most dangerous of all, the true story of the death of Malikos's original wife back in the day, the woman who he loved and lost, the pain that turned him into the cold man she had known. Layla knew that past had not been buried, and that using it now would be the perfect weapon. That afternoon, he wrote a letter addressed to a powerful political rival of Malik, a man who had been waiting for years for an opportunity to overthrow him. In the letter, Layla hinted that Malik was vulnerable. He was in love, unbalanced, and that Alina was a foreign, a threat to Dubai's political balance. The letter was delivered by one of the servants loyal to her. Meanwhile, Alina continued her journey. Every morning I saw her in the gardens teaching a new servant to read. Every night she slept next to Malik without haste, without pressure, and the silent love began to grow. The desire between them was real, but different. It wasn't a consuming fire. It was a warmth that enveloped, that grew with every glance, with every light caress, with every shared breath. On the 6th consecutive night they slept together, Malik finally took her face between her hands. "May I?" Alina touched her lips with her fingers. "Don't ask permission, asks for the truth." And then they kissed, not as those who desire, but as who belong. The kiss was the beginning of a new era, a milestone. That night, they finally surrendered slowly, reverently, with love. It was the first time, and it was everything it should be. Warm, gentle, respectful, one body discovering another, one heart opening space for the other, and in the end, they slept intertwined with the light soul. Alina was finally no longer prisoner. She was wife, companion, and queen. But while she slept in peace, the enemy's steps were already approaching the palace, and what was coming would put everything in danger. The previous night had been the highlight of Alina's journey, the first time she gave herself to Malik with a calm heart, a willing body, and the soul open. What had begun as a kidnapping had slowly turned into something much bigger, a story of redemption and unlikely love born in the heart of a palace where all other stories ended in silence and pain. But as she slept in the arms of the man who had made her his queen, the enemy was approaching. The letter written by Layla had reached her recipient, Salamin Rami, a powerful opposition leader to Malik's council. He was influential, shrewd, and patient. And now, with Layla's words in his hands, he saw the opportunity perfect. Malik's emotional fragility would be his weapon. In the morning next, Malik was urgently summoned by his personal advisor. "Sir, the council is assembled. We have received a formal complaint." "From whom?" "It's not signed, but it's being taken into account. Serious. They say that his conduct is being compromised by a foreigner and that she could be acting on behalf of outside interests." The silences took over the room. Malik looked out the window for a long time. Down below, he saw Alina sitting with 2 maids, teaching them to read an old book. He smiled. Then he closed his eyes. "Prepare the council chamber. I'll be there in a hour." Alina felt the tension in the air. The maids walked more fast. The guards were reinforcing the entrances. Something had changed. Hours later, in the afternoon, Malik did not appear for dinner or sleep. The next morning, he prevented her from leaving her chambers. The memory of when she was a prisoner returned like a blow to the chest, but this time, there was something different. It wasn't fear that dominated his soul. It was rebellion and the certainty that no matter what happened, she would fight. At the end of the afternoon, Amara, the forgotten wife, appeared in his chambers with anguished eyes. "Layla has plotted against you. She has accused you of manipulating Malik to gain political power, and he has believed." "No, but the council is putting pressure on him. They are questioning him. They said he could lose the throne if he stays with you." Alina was silent for a moment. She sat down on the edge of the bed with his hands trembling on his knees. "So that's it," he murmured. "Now that we have found, they want to separate us." Amara took his hands. "If he loves you, as he says, he will fight, and so will I. I will not wait for fate any longer. I will go search for him." In the council chamber, Malik was surrounded by men dressed in dark clothes, fine linen turbans, and judgmental looks. Salim heroes. He was a feared and respected leader, but now we see weakness. This foreigner is a risk. She's undermining your decisions. She's upsetting the sacred order of the arena. He is implanting ideas that threaten stability. He is teaching the women. That's the only thing that scares them. She's not one of us, and you've put her there above all. That is a betrayal of our roots. Malik stood up with firm gaze and low but sharp voice. The greatest betrayal of our roots has been get used to injustice. You are confused, bewitched. So what about me? Let everyone here say what their crime was. Silence. Malik walked slowly to the center of the room. She never asked for power. She never asked Mejuwels, never demanded a throne. All he did was teach me to see, and that's why they want to punish her. One of the oldest counselors stood up. The point is that her alliance with her could set a dangerous precedent if we accept a foreigner as queen. The door opened with a bang. Everyone turned. Alina was there. She was wearing a white tunic and her hair was loose, just like the day she was pulled from the beach. But her gaze was different. There was no fear, only dignity. If the problem is me, then I'll leave the palace right now. Malik stepped forward. No, listen, she said with firmness. I have survived everything you have created. I have been prisoner. They've threatened me, they've humiliated me, but here I am standing. No, I want a throne built on distrust. If my presence threatens your empire, then let it fall. But know this, it is not I who have failed you. It is you who have failed your own women. The room fell completely silent. Solemn, she swallowed. Some counselors looked down. Malik approached her with tearful eyes. Are you going to abandon me? I'm not going to teach you how to fight for me like I fought for you. Malik turned to the council. She won't go anywhere. Part. If they take my throne away for this, let them do it. But let them know this. A leader who sacrifices love for convenience is already dead inside. Silence. Then one of the advisors, stiffer, she stood up. I have never seen courage like that of this young woman, and I have never I'd seen you so alive. Malik looked at Alina. Stay. The decision is unanimous. Stay. Days later, the palace held an unprecedented ceremony. Alina Volkova was officially declared queen by lot, not as part of Aaron, not as just another wife, but as an official companion with an active voice, with right to express an opinion and make decisions. And that night, in front of all the women who watched in silence, Alina gave a speech. 2 years ago, I was taken to strength. Today, I stay by choice, not because I am weak, but because I have learned that to love is also to resist. The women of the palace, maids, teachers, guards, all, they applauded. Malik looked at her as if he were seeing the first woman he had ever truly loved. Because she was. For the first time, I knew what it meant to love without the need to dominate. Years later, stories of Malik's palace were told throughout the region, but one in particular stood the test of time, that of the young Russian woman with sad eyes, who was kidnapped, who survived, who taught a king to love, and who became a living legend. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave your like and comment below what you thought of the story, and I'll leave you another exciting story in the final screen for you to see. See you next video.